Representative Andrea White and former state representative, now with the Chamber of Commerce, Rick Carfagna. Thank you guys for joining me on Message from the House.
Exciting to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm glad to be here and talk about things we care about. So thanks for inviting.
I know we just talked, the focus is childcare, and you were in Florida this weekend doing just that, childcare.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I was reminded again how difficult it is for families today
Yeah.
to take care of their kids and manage all the responsibilities and really focus on things that are most important because they're bombarded by so many outside influences and priorities. So.
I feel like it's just that much harder to be a parent these days. Not that it wasn't harder, back then, but just, it's always hard to be a parent. And that's why these issues are important, and I'm excited to talk about them. I want to take a minute, Rick, if you could explain kind of where you're at right now with the chamber, what your district was when you were a state rep. Talk me through it.
Sure. Well, I spent 3 terms as a state representative. I represented what formerly was the 68th House District, but at that time it was the eastern half of Delaware County, which is where I live, and then it was all of Knox County as well. Now that's since changed, but now I'm with the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. I've been there for a little over 3 years now, and I serve as the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs. So I direct our public policy agenda, and I also oversee our legislative team.
Nice. There you go. Like using both skills, right?
Right.
Very transferable.
I feel like I'm still in office. I still get to work on the economic issues that were near and dear when I was a member of the House. So I get to cheat term limits a little bit.
Right. It's like you can take the state representative out of the state house, but you can't take the state house out of the former state representative, right?
Back in the Rife Center.
There you go. Full circle.
And you know how the sausage is made, so you understand you don't get everything you want, but you really can press and get what you need. So
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And then Rep. White, talk me through what is your district and, how long have you been in the legislature?
So this is my 5th year in the legislature and my 3rd district because each time my district has changed fairly substantially. I live in Kettering, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton, and I've always had Kettering, Oakwood, and then I've had back and forth with different communities. But right now I have downtown Dayton, all the historic districts, Old North Dayton by Dayton Children, some kind of fairly struggling areas of Dayton, and then I also have Riverside, where the Air Force Museum is. I've got Kettering and Oakwood.
Okay, very nice. Difficult to learn, new constituents, different parts of the state, so hats off to you for, committing and learning the different parts that you have served for the last 5 years. So childcare, why has this been a passion project for you during your time in the legislature?
Well, I think it has evolved from my passion for helping children and families be the best versions of themselves, have the resources they need to thrive so that they're successful, they're thriving as adults. And I think as a state and in my experience before the legislature, I observed a lot of fixing. We didn't spend enough up front to prevent problems. We end up fixing and really sometimes not fixing some substantial problems that could have been prevented. So when you learn about early childhood and birth to 5, particularly if you invest in those early years and you really focus on what a child needs from a brain development standpoint, from a social and emotional standpoint, and what that parent needs, then you're going to have a better chance of having a thriving K through 12 student and having an adult who can really manage and contribute to their community and their family. So childcare became something that became very apparent that, we have all these businesses coming to Ohio. We have a thriving economy that we're trying to continue to thrive, but yet we have a struggling and staggering workforce crisis. And that's kind of a dual crisis because the workforce crisis in great instances is influenced by not having enough childcare so that people can go back into the workforce. So I kind of fell into the childcare area, but what I learned was you really need to have that quality early learning, and you've got to have accessible, affordable, convenient, and safe childcare in order for parents to feel comfortable leaving their children, and in some cases going back to the workforce that they left because they didn't have it.
I will say, when I was a reporter in Columbus, part of my beat or topic that I focused on was infant mortality, specifically in Columbus. And we would go to these events, baby community baby showers, right? For trying to provide the essentials for new moms or, under, developed areas and the underdeveloped is not the right word, areas of Columbus and poverty.
Under
And
resourced.
yeah, there you go. And just learning, I think a lot of people take that stuff for granted when there are a lot of folks in the state that can't afford or can't get the necessities to successfully raise a child early on. And Rick, the Chamber of Commerce, when I think of the chamber, I don't think of childcare being, top priority, but talk me through why that is so important for you
Sure.
guys to work
Well,
on.
right now in the state of Ohio, if you talk to any business, and it doesn't matter what industry, what sector, the number one universal challenge you'll hear from them is workforce. I can't find and I can't keep good help. Now, historically, when we talk about workforce, I mean, workforce anymore, we throw that term around. It's a very broad, vague term. Historically, when you talk about workforce, you associate that with job training, job credentialing, making sure that we have the right skill sets to fill jobs. That's largely still true. What we of the chamber have realized in a lot of our own research is that there are other factors involved in having a stable and qualified workforce here in the state, and that involves housing, it involves transportation, and then, yes, it involves childcare because employers need to have a reliable labor base that can live in the vicinity of where they work. They have the means to get to and from work safely. And oh, yeah, you need to have someone to watch their kids and do so in a place that is hygienic, it's safe, and hopefully it's intellectually stimulating.
So, would you both say that the economy and childcare are connected?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have tens of thousands of jobs along the way or on their way between the mega projects and some of the other really large economic development wins that have been announced. But the problem, as Representative White alluded to, is that childcare is too scarce, and when you can find it, it's too expensive. And it has since morphed into more than just a family issue. It is now a significant workforce throttle here in the state of Ohio. Um, the United States Chamber of Commerce Foundation recently published a report. It's called Untapped Potential Ohio. You can Google it, Untapped Potential Ohio.
Thank you for bringing your prop.
Yes, that's my prop.
There you go.
But no, they've looked at this problem in 14 different states over the last 5 years. And in every state that they have studied this, they have found hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in lost economic activity due to inadequacy of childcare. So when they studied Ohio, and they just published this in April, the numbers that came back were staggering. $5.48 billion in lost economic activity. That's the financial impact of an inadequate childcare to Ohio's economy. $5.48 billion. Now, of that, you've got just over $1.5 billion in lost annual tax revenues. And then you've got just under $4 billion in lost productivity, employees that are having to take off work because they've had childcare disruptions. There's employee absenteeism. All of those costs compound for the employers. So really significant. 70% in the report, 70% of the parents that in the last 3 months have reported that they've had to leave work because of some sort of disruption in childcare. And then 33% of parents that have had a disruption in work related to childcare have left the workforce altogether. So what that means, Olivia, is that right now, back to the whole, I can't find and keep good help. We have good help all throughout the state. You have an entire demographic of Ohioans right now that are college educated, they are skilled, they're talented, they're hardworking, they're everything you want in an employee, and they're not even looking for work because they've done the math and they have realized that bringing in a second household paycheck that goes right back out the door to pay for childcare just simply isn't worth it. And so what we have now are employers that are having to settle. They're having to settle for less qualified talent. They're having to overpay to keep people on staff. They're having to relax their hiring standards, and that's just not good for our economy.
Absolutely.
Well, and when you think about, we have spent a lot of time and money as a state building the infrastructure. We need more roads. We need to build job sites. We need to attract companies. But what we haven't spent enough time and money on is building the human infrastructure. Like Rick is saying, if we don't have the housing, if we don't have the transportation, it doesn't matter how many jobs you have. You've got to have somebody that you care about who can safely care for your child and help them grow and develop as you would. I will point out a couple numbers that I think are pretty significant. When you look at the average cost of childcare in this state, the average cost of center-based for Ohio families is anywhere from $9,500 to over $12,000. And it's much higher in Columbus and cities like Columbus and Dayton and Cincinnati. And when you look at trying to pay for an infant and a toddler simultaneously, that's 10% of somebody's $10 an hour of somebody's wages. They can't afford to go back to work if they don't have enough of an hourly wage to make that work. We bemoan that we need to get people up and off public benefits, but they need to be able to take higher paying jobs. And that's why we've been pushing to get, higher percentage of publicly funded childcare support for families so they can say yes to a job that offers healthcare perhaps at $20 an hour versus our current 145% federal poverty level to qualify. We need a longer on-ramp so that families can ease themselves up and out of poverty. And then you look at families that are of means that could get a better paying job. It's almost not paying. I think Rick gave you a few numbers. When you look at, the number of people, McKinsey did a study also, and they said about 8% of Ohioans can afford to pay for an infant and a toddler right now. 40% are going into debt, and they expect 55% to go into debt very soon in order to make those payments. It's like a college payment. The other thing is when you look at the number of parents who say they would go back to work, a large number of parents say, 60% say the lack of childcare is their reason for leaving work. And a large percentage of those moms said, 70% said they would go back to work or work more hours if they could just get better access to childcare. So it is definitely a dual economic family life situation to be able to have the resources you need to support yourself and your family. We just need more quality and affordable childcare closer to work and home.
Yeah, I mean, my mom, candidly, she's a nurse. She's been a nurse her entire career. She gets to retire. I'm very proud of her. But childcare was very hard. She couldn't find quality childcare. And so she just made the decision to step away, not because she wasn't capable. She loves work. I mean, she's even said staying home and taking care of us were, some of the darkest times because she wanted to work and she kind of lost her identity. Obviously, she loved being a mom and spending time with us. But when you have folks that have the skills and love to work and want to contribute in their, in their areas that, I'm hearing that it's an issue really facing everyone, not just those in poverty or without
Absolutely.
resources.
All socioeconomic levels, because it's even if you have money to pay for it, you can't always find it. We have
Yeah.
like 40% of the state is a childcare desert
Correct.
where they don't have enough childcare to care. So you have people driving 20 minutes to get to the childcare place, then they're driving 20 minutes in the opposite direction to get to work and then back. And then if your child is sick or any of those sorts of things, you're kind of like, uh-oh, what do I do?
And you're having to get on a wait list the moment you find out you're pregnant.
Yeah.
And as Representative White alluded to, I mean, you're paying the equivalent of in-state public university tuition
Hmm.
for an infant and toddler. It's roughly $12,300, give or take, on average for infant and toddler care. So that's on average. So people are paying far more than that.
Yeah.
It's the same as putting your child through college.
Very interesting stuff. And then, Rep. White, I want to talk about the Joint Study Committee on Ohio's publicly funded childcare and Step Up to Quality. Talk me through that experience. I read through a little bit of the report yesterday. What did you learn from that?
Well, I think the biggest thing I learned is that there are so many passionate, caring people who are caring for our kids. People who are in the field, parents who came in and testified, people like Rick came and testified about the business case of why we need to do more to support childcare in this state. I think what I also learned is that it is truly a multifaceted problem. I mean, we have a problem with the workforce behind the workforce. We don't have enough people going into the childcare profession. It doesn't pay well. It's not necessarily properly valued. We need more training so that people who are caring for kids understand what does it mean to be really doing effective child development and intellectual development so kids are ready for kindergarten. Only 36% of our kids in this state are showing up ready for kindergarten. And part of that problem is They need better learning. Parents need help to figure out how to help their children develop, and people working in the childcare field who in many cases are qualifying for publicly funded childcare themselves because the wages are so low. So we need to do more to build up the profession, and we need to also look at avenues where we can help high school students get a basic child development associate credential, and then they can leverage that to work while they're going to school and getting perhaps an associate's degree and morphing that into maybe if they want to end up in K through 12 education. We need more pathways. And let's not make this one and done. We also need to support more family home providers. There's plenty of moms who want to stay home, or dads who want to stay home with their kids, who would like to stay home with their kids, who are choosing to make great sacrifices. But we also have parents who don't have the choice. They can't make ends meet, or they prefer to work. And so what can we do to accommodate and build that workforce? Because providers have empty rooms right now in some places because they can't find workers.
Rick, do you think that that study and, Rep. White's passion for this in the legislature, do you think we're getting somewhere as far as legislation goes to fix this issue? Rep. White, you have a couple bills that I want to touch on here in a minute, but I'll ask you that.
No, sure. Well, I think, and Rep. White alluded to it, I mean, you really need to attack this problem, we think, from three different areas. I mean, first, you've got to try to find a way to make it more affordable for working families. So right now, the federal poverty level eligibility to qualify for publicly funded childcare in Ohio is 145%, 145% FPL. It's one of the lowest in the country, the lowest in the country. All of our surrounding states are either at 150% or at 200% federal poverty level. So more working families around Ohio are eligible for publicly funded childcare. That makes a really big difference. So you've got to, that's number one. Number two, you've got to increase capacity because you can make it more affordable. You can increase demand overnight, but you still don't have all the options. So we need to find ways to grow more center-based care. And as Rep. White said, more in-home care. 60% of rural Ohioans are in a childcare desert. Almost 40% of overall Ohioans live in a childcare desert. So it's a scarcity problem. I mean, it costs a lot because supply is low. And then, you can't do number one, number two without doing number three, which is growing that workforce behind the workforce. You've got to have people to staff these childcare facilities. And we just don't have enough people going into the early childhood education space right now because it is a low wage job. You're competing with retail. You're competing with the hospitality industries. I mean, working as a childcare caregiver, you're going to make less than $20 an hour.
Yep.
And less than 15 in many cases.
And so it's just it's hard to convince people to go into that profession when you can go into all these other areas like retail and hospitality that don't require a lot of education and make far more money and frankly probably have far less stress too because you're not dealing with children all day. It takes a great deal of patience to handle children.
I know.
I think one of the other things we learned from the study committee is, we needed to take a look at the regulations in Ohio and how can we cut through the red tape and really make it a lot easier. And so there's been a lot of work done first by the Department of Job and Family Services and then now our new Children and Youth Department that is doing a phenomenal job of kind of flattening things out, making it so much easier for people to get into the field, for providers. And then the other thing is Ohio was not paying their providers at the current level of market rate expectation. We get federal money to help pay for childcare. And so we are now required to pay, first of all, based on enrollment, not attendance. And we're also required to pay at a higher market rate percentage than we were. So that's going to also help with supply and demand by making the providers more stable, have more funding, so that they can actually pay their workforce better wages and those sorts of things. And that's really, some of my bills are aimed at that we can't solve this alone.
Yep.
It's not a government solved problem. It's not a family alone. It's not a business alone. We got to look at ways to bring the public and the private sectors together to help solve the problem.
Yeah. So talk me through tax credits for employers that provide childcare benefits to employees. That is a piece of legislation you're working on. How would that work?
Okay, so that bill is based on what I learned was we have a federal tax credit of up to $150,000 for businesses that they could be capitalizing on,
Yep.
but they have to spend over $600,000 to get anything because it's 25% of your investment. The other thing is you can only spend it on very restricted things. So it's not really well utilized by a lot of employers. So what we are finding is that when states have a tax credit that kind of comes alongside that, where you're offering a tax credit for employers to get in the game and basically maybe have on-site or near-site childcare, to give employees a stipend to help pay for their childcare, or to even help with home providers and help provide equipment and things to build up more family home providers that are around their facility. You know, a lot of hospitals and other places, they need 24/7 childcare for their employees. So how can we help out with some creative ways? And so this is a $500,000 per year, which I understand I started high because you start high, so then you're willing to go low. You don't start low and then you go lower. But up to 500,000 a year that an employer could deduct for their actual expenses, and it could come off income tax, any CAT tax obligations, some other different taxes that we have. The other thing that it would do is allow you to have carryover. So if you're a large employer and you're spending $1 million a year, then you're going to be able to carry that over 5 years, maybe if you end up having years where you spend less. So it's just to throw it out there and say, how can we incentivize more employers to get in the game? We provide so many tax credits and so many exemptions. And some of them, when you go back and look at that lost tax receipts report, whatever the formal name is, we're giving tax credits for all sorts of things. We really need to do tax credits to help solve the problems for employers and for employees, for citizens in this state.
Rick, when you learned about this bill and just the other ones going through the legislature, what are your thoughts as far as how this would incentivize people to go back to work?
Sure. Well, I mean, we've stated all along, this has to be a shared collective responsibility. You can't just expect the state government to just throw money at this problem and take care of the problem. You've got to have some skin in the game from the business community, and the business community agrees that this is a workforce problem. It's holding back talent from coming to fill those open spots. But it's also intimidating for businesses. They don't want to shoulder the total weight of this societal problem either. But I think they're willing to step forward and contribute to this problem. I think what is great about Representative White's bill and other bills she's doing is that it provides for that flexibility for the business community. It's voluntary. It's meant to be kind of that carrot approach, that positive reinforcement, because businesses are going to attack this from different ways. There are businesses of different sizes that have different employee-based needs. There are businesses that have different resources that they can bring to the table. So, the larger ones, maybe they can provide on-site childcare. Some of the other ones might maybe contract with a provider in the area to purchase a couple of slots at the daycare and then offer those up as employee benefits. Or maybe they do provide a stipend. Here's some money. You go find it on your own. Have at it. And other employers may be just changing up their workday, allowing for work from home options or allowing for flexible scheduling. So, I think this positively reinforces and gives the employer community a little bit more confidence to step and take some initiative and make that private investment in childcare.
Absolutely. Rep. White, 41, just because we are running short on time, talk me through now House Bill 41.
Okay, so House Bill 41 actually is about $10 million per year to help put pilot grants together so that you can get up to $750,000 as a business to start on-site or near-site childcare, or to start contracting some of the things that Rick was describing, contracting with a childcare center to help pay for slots or get discounts for your employees to get the ball rolling. So how do we get employers in the game incentivized with grants? There's a number of employers that are actually investing in an old warehouse space that they have available, or a university has a whole wing that's not available. Not being used. How can you rehab that space? Well, there's a lot of restrictions on how money can be used. So let's give them grants so that they can actually help make this happen, build that capacity close to work, and then get a tax credit while they're doing it. The other thing about House Bill 41 is it is about helping with a toolkit. What's all the available resources for employees? How about flex spending accounts for your employees? How about using this as an opportunity and an alternative if your employee doesn't need health insurance? Why don't you create a package and a menu approach? So lots of different things and ideas. It's technical assistance. And it's a design learning lab and a toolkit for employers as well as the grants.
And there's been a lot of success with this type of model. We have a lot of just dormant, underutilized commercial property throughout the state of Ohio right now. And as she had said, I mean, you're not going to necessarily build your way out of this, but how do we make use of existing fixed assets that are out there? We've seen this done in housing, where you take, right down the street here in downtown Columbus, they are repurposing old office buildings into downtown living space. We've seen schoolhouses throughout in rural Ohio that have been repurposed and made into community housing. So, this kind of model can be done. I think if you equip local governments and contractors and nonprofits with the wherewithal to do this, you can really grow that supply. That was that number 2 bucket that I talked about, is increasing supply. There are a couple of really good examples throughout the state right now. Up in Cuyahoga County, for example, their public library system in Maple Heights, they had a branch of the library where they had some underutilized conference room space.
Yeah.
They converted it over into 4 different classrooms. They contracted with an area childcare provider. So now you have childcare space at the public library branch. It's already a community facility that people are coming to. And then they replicated that model out in Parma Heights. They're building a new branch out there, and they've already accommodated for, I think, 6,000 square feet of classroom space that'll be used for childcare. So again, it's being creative, looking at the assets that we already have that are being underutilized, and find a way to convert that over into childcare space.
And I just want to add real quickly, I think the reality is the more people talk about it, which I've so appreciated, the business community has magnified the issue. When lots of people are talking about it, then they start thinking about it, and then they start coming together and creating shared solutions to the problem, because that's how it's going to get fixed. We've all got to work together to make it happen.
It's great to hear that the business community is buying in. It's great to hear that the legislature is looking at it from a multifaceted angle and problem. And just thank you both for coming on and breaking some of this down. I think we could probably talk for another 30 minutes, but we are running out of time. Quickly, you can follow us on our social media at the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook, Ohio House _GOP on Instagram, OHR GOP Caucus on Twitter. You can subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. This certainly will be an ongoing issue that we continue to follow. Maybe we, come back when legislation is officially passed. But until then, Representative Andrea White and former Representative Rick Carfagna, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.
It's a really important issue, and I appreciate you providing visibility to it.